All right, let's talk a little bit about large group evangelism. What does that look like? Adam, again, why don't you start us off about what does large group evangelism look like in your context? Because that's still important. Like we talked about the value of us doing it, leading our students to do it, but we still have opportunities to have larger groups, and we don't want to neglect those evangelism opportunities there.
Yeah. The main large group opportunity that I'm going to talk about is like what I think a lot of people would understand as like a worship service type of deal. We actually utilize multiple different large group settings for different things. Like we have, I've had lunches before in the past that were mixed with a lot of different people from the university, students and staff and faculty and different things. I think those things are you have to think about them specifically, how you're going to share the gospel in those ways. And then very like a lot of the things I've done with international students specifically have a whole different model and method to them. And so, and you have to approach them differently. And so the one that I'm primarily going to talk about when it comes to large group is like a worship service, or like the traditional understanding of like a service that you would have worship and speaking and different things that. A couple of things that I took from the church background. So I was a youth and children's director. I pastored a church for a small time when I was in college. I moved to New Orleans. I was a youth pastor, a church planner. And then when I was in Arkansas, I was a church-based college minister before I went on BCM staff. And a couple of things that I took from like the church ministry world into the BCM context when it comes to services specifically. And a lot of pastors say this, so this is not a new phrase, but like the sermon starts in the parking lot. Like I think evangelism in our services starts in the parking lot. And a lot of the talk most of the time in books and different things in services has to do with hospitality, which is actually a deep abiding practice for the life of a believer, is how are you hospitable in your personal life? And a lot of times that like breaks into your like corporate life or like your communal spaces, like a ministry. So from the time that people walk onto our campus, we have parking lot greeters. We have a specific team that helps us put together. I mean, they just stand outside and wave signs and different things like that to help people flow into it. We have a team of students that's specifically trained to do check-in. The training is not uber complicated at all. It's more like just helping them work through it pretty fast. And then we have a specific breakdown of our service. I'm going to start with the order of service. So I think every campus and campus minister has to determine what type of worship service fits the needs of their campus the best. So when I was in Arkansas, the campus was more like 8 to 10,000, 12,000 with master's students, but the geographic footprint of the campus and the amount of students that lived on campus was low. It was only a couple thousand. So the foot traffic that frequently came into our worship service was a lot of the same people a lot of the times. And then as people commuted in, they would come to worship service, stuff like that. So my services, since I've come to the University of South Carolina, we just have way more guests every week at services. So our services at USC are more evangelistic than the services that we did when I was at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. But kind of the way that we structure it is in the service element of it is we do. So when I say like last year, we had 168 students make gospel driven decisions in our, like through our ministry. What I mean by that is I have contact and follow up from each one of those students. I don't like personal. I mean, some people can. I'm not talented in a room to just like make people respond or to cultivate that time at the end of a service during an invitation that really draws people every time. We do it differently every time, but every single student that responds, I have a follow-up card on them. So that's kind of what I mean by that. We lay individual cards in each one of the seats that are in our worship room, and we have pins that are in those seats too. We introduce the cards at the front end of the service, and we have a student do a testimony towards the preaching time every single week. We ask them just to share their testimony. Man, when I was younger in ministry, I wanted like those students sharing to have a little bit more powerful testimonies. And I would do a lot of coaching with them and stuff like that. I've gotten to a point like I don't care. Like I want the student to just get up there and share because I never know who's in my room and how that connects and relates with them. Like, so I used to be like very like selective on it. And I just gotten to a point like, hey, if you're a student in the ministry, like you're going to get asked to do it at some point in time throughout your lineup. And so, and then at the very end, I actually stole this from a camp because we utilize multiple speakers at our large group worship service. I do like the closing invitation and response to cards every single time. And sometimes I'll let other staff do it, but because I'm the primary person that follows up with text messages, there is something very intentional that I'm trying to do with my relationship with them. And that's help them, especially if they're not a believer, to get put in a situation where they can ask questions that they don't even know they need to ask sometimes and help them follow up. So in our on our response card, you can kind of see this. One of the first box, usually I explain this every single time, is follow Jesus. At the beginning of semesters, I'll explain all of the categories. And then as it gets later in the semester, I'll say something like, hey, I think all of the categories are pretty self-explanatory, except for one. And I'm going to explain that one real quick. And I'll do that and I'll do the follow Jesus. And then I like, this has probably been one of the best ones. And I think you can see that. But I'll say like, hey, you might be in the room and you don't even know what's going on. Like you feel like something's going on, something's made sense to you. You're trying to connect dots, but you have no idea how that fits into a category at all. And so the last box is if I'm unsure, but I want to take my next step in faith. That's the last one that I'll explain a lot of the time. And man, and so the way that we do it is we have stations in the back that they can drop cards. I've gotten to a point where I literally say almost exactly what I'm about to tell you. I tell them, hey, these cards, this is meant to be a no pressure situation. Like I'll just say, I was not raised religious and in religious ceremonies. So one of the things when I would go to religious services when I was in middle school, high school, and college, because I got invited by friends, sometimes it was weird. And I don't want you to feel weird. So this card is meant for you to, if you have a book or something like that, you can slap this card face down. We ask that everybody on their way out the door put all of their cards in the baskets in the back. The space is a multi-purpose space. We're going to do a lunch in a couple of days. So we have to clean up all this stuff anyway. So if everybody will put cards back there, that helps us one, clean up, but also people that respond, it puts them in a no pressure situation to respond. And I say that about that's almost the vernacular every time. The last thing that I wanted to share, because I really like this, I had a student when I was in Little Rock, Arkansas. She worked at Francesca's, the women's clothing store, and they had a very specific, when somebody walked in their door, process that they would take people through in order to help them have the best experience that they could as possible. And she was the one that helped us to develop this for our ministry in Arkansas. And I've just kept it the whole time. But it's a process. We coach students and train them on how to do this, even so much so that we train, like, I've had different trainings where I'll coach them on how to stand and shake people's hand and how to put their name tag over the hand that they shake with. So it's very easy to identify the name. But this is there's 5 different movements. There's meet before you greet. So you want to initiate meeting somebody before you actually greet them. So our student leaders put a high priority on them engaging new visitors for the first time. Smile, helping people stay a while. Help. Oh, I got balloons. Helping them focus on their facial expressions when they interact with people. We don't want to be fake, but we don't want to be Eeyores either. Does that make sense? So there is joy that's in the goodness of all of our lives, even if we're having a bad day. And we want to try to, in this moment, harness that a little bit more. So smile, help them stay a while. Help them go from me and mine to you and yours. So this is where it gets very specific. We ask student leaders when they meet somebody for the first time to stay with them for a little while, introduce them to other people, walk them around our ministry building, like at least show them where the bathrooms are so that they'll at least start to begin to navigate the building by themselves. So meet before you greet, smile, help them stay a while, help them go from me and mine to you and yours. The fourth one is show them the opportunity for community. So we have different pictures on the wall and photos and different things like that that they can talk about, like, oh, this is a mission trip that we went on, or this is fall retreat that we do every October. This is Converge, which is our statewide like Christian conference that we'll go. This is our ski trip. But it shows them opportunities that they can get involved with the community of the BCM. And then the fifth one is make the last impression a lasting impression. We ask students, if you meet somebody, get their phone number, and just send them a simple text message after everything's kind of closed down where you say, hey, it was so good to meet you tonight. I hope I see you next week. Thanks for coming. And that's it. And so, and we coach, train, encourage. We try to celebrate as much as we can all that specific process. And it's really cool. What I've found is students that are introverted don't naturally think of that process, but when they have it, they do really well with it.
Mm-hmm.
Students that are extroverted do a really terrible time of keeping the elements like in that order, but they're usually pretty good about doing the elements themselves. Even if, like, sometimes we have this one girl, she's a rock star, she works at Buckle, and like, I think when I told her these things, she's like, duh, I already do that. I don't need you to tell me how to do it. I'm like, that's fine, Mackenzie, you do whatever. But she was just like, she would naturally do that. But sometimes it helped her, like, knowing those things. Like, sometimes she would forget to text message new people, but then oh yeah, I need to make the last impression a lasting impression. And so she would do it too. So it helps keep extroverts like kind of in a process, which usually they have a terrible time doing. So, and I'm an extrovert, so I say that with all authenticity. Yeah. So that's what I would say when it comes to large group. I think just being intentional with it. We offer invitations, but all of our invitations are done via these cards. Sometimes we'll have a very gifted speaker that's really good at like sharing the gospel, doing raised hands kind of thing, or having people come down. Actually, I haven't had anybody do a come down to the front in years. But some speakers are really good at that. I try to let speakers naturally just flow how they are. But what I took from the camp is to always just be clear and help people understand the process for how to, if they want to take a next step, make that process very simple for them to be able to do it.
Great. What else would you guys add?
Yeah, for our context, it's going to be a little bit different. Large group is going to be a very, very different number for what we consider a large group. But most of the time, non-Christians don't show up to a Christian event unless they've been specifically brought by somebody. And we almost always assume that they're there because the person that brought them with them has already done the intentional personal evangelism with them. Like, usually you hear about Jesus for the first time in a one-on-one engagement before you'll ever show up to a large group engagement. So when we think about our large evangelistic group idea things, it's how do we reinforce the personal story? So how do we take that gospel story where they heard their friends share, this is what I believe about Jesus, and show them that it is not just that person that believes this, but it's the group that believes this. This is what we believe about Jesus. So when we do an evangelistic event, we're trying to focus on multiple voices, multiple students saying very similar things about their beliefs about Jesus in different ways. So how do we, student testimony, student leadership, students talking specifically about their beliefs about Jesus, so that it transitions this personal evangelism time from this is what my friend believes about Jesus to, oh, there's a whole group of these people here that are on the same page about who this Jesus is. So we look at large group evangelism as kind of reinforcement of the personal evangelism time, of going from going from a singular voice to multiple voices. So when we do those things, and we don't like we don't necessarily always these will be intentionally planned events where we've done some personal evangelism, we've had some good success, and once or twice during the term, we will have these events where those folks who have shared can invite the people they've been sharing with to hear not just their voice about who Jesus is, but hear multiple voices. And we almost always make it student voice heavy in a way that it is, and I've said this way too many times, but it's what we believe about Jesus. The songs will be about what we believe about Jesus. The stories will be about what we believe about Jesus, that sort of piece. So that would be what I would add, from kind of a context where, where people don't randomly show up to Christian events. They have to be brought to them. And they're probably, we just assume that this might be the first Christian event they've been to in their life. So those are kind of the things we're thinking about when we do large group evangelism events.
Great.
Yeah, I would just say at North Georgia, we're kind of like South Carolina, where we have guest speakers come in, and we always, I mean, I always encourage them. We want you to share the gospel, give an invitation, and so with our large group, we try to make it every service as evangelistic as we can. I think, Adam, you hit it on the head, is laying out the service that kind of just walks almost. I mean, you're not saying it all at the front, but you're kind of walking a student through, okay, here's what the night's going to look like. I mean, and so we kind of give the students a head up. This is what the night's going to look like. And so that nothing is off surprising coming out of left field, for them. But one of our struggles, I mean, and is getting the contacts, and this is what, when leaders come back in August, we're going to spend a little bit of pretty much a good fair amount of time, is how can we put something into place this year that we can get the information if somebody does make a contact, or make a decision in our service. How can we get it so that we can follow up to make sure that they have the resources that they need? I mean, i.e., do they have a Bible? And so, and because I have a lot of students come and say, hey, do you have a Bible that I can give to the student? They just made a decision for Christ. Yes, get their information. And so that we can have that information. And so, but as we think about large group, I think if we're not careful, we can just do a large group and not even give an opportunity for a student to accept Christ, because we may deem that service not a gospel focus. Well, we never know. And so you always, and that's why I always tell our leaders that we always have to be intentional of giving students the opportunity to come to know Christ, because you never know, they come to know Christ when we do a scavenger hunt. But I think if we just focus on just our large group as our only time to share Jesus, I feel like there's times we miss the mark. So we may do another event where we say, hey, we're going to have someone share the gospel, at least a 5 to 10 minute testimony, share the gospel and give an invitation. But the focus of that evening is we're going to hang out and have fun and fellowship around the table, but we presented the gospel. And I give a an example here is that I had a sorority reach out to us and they wanted to utilize our building for something. And I said to them, I says, yes, but I want a couple of our girls to come in and share at the beginning and like just do a welcome, kind of what you said, here's the bathrooms and all this other stuff. That's what I told the sorority, but I told the girls, it says, in this welcome, I want you to share the gospel. It's like we may never have 100 these 100 girls back in our building, but you have like 5 minutes to share the gospel in your welcome, so that they hear truth, so that they hear things. And so we got to see the opportunity and seize the opportunity. And so because it would just could have been an easy say, yeah, you could use our building. We'll have somebody there to be the building monitored and things, but and disappoint, but never the gospel may not have ever went to those the 100+ girls that were here for that sorority event. And so, but especially I like what you kind of the walkthrough of the follow up and make sure we do a welcome team. We have a welcome team. We have a from the park. We do games out on our front lawn early to try to attract people to come and hang out with us so that we can just meet them on our front lawn before service starts. And then we have a greet team inside our building. We always tell our leaders, don't cluster with your friends, go find new people and walk them around. And so like I love the idea that at least kind of show them and then here's 3 other people that you need to know in the BCM. And so it's like I think at times if we're not careful, we can treat our BCM large group service like we are going to church. Like this is because this is what we've always do. We walk in, we go sit here, we mingle with a few people, and then we walk out. Well, we let's spread ourselves out a little bit. And so that's why I try to spread out. So
one of the things I was going to back to, like y'all said this multiple times, but I remember this is when I started. This was the thought that really got me thinking a lot about just invitations in my service is somebody responding to the gospel in a service is the long process of God working in a person's life and probably like a very intentional relationship that one of our students has been cultivating.
Yeah.
And they respond in our services. That's just the fruit of them working. And kind of like what y'all said, like, man, if we don't give opportunities or invitations, or if it's not clear how to do that, like, I mean, I know, like, I've been sitting in church services before where I've invited people and I've just been like, man, I hope pastor gives an invitation. If nothing else, so we can talk about after the service is over with, like, hey, you said you've been kind of thinking about this. Does it make sense? Like when he gave that invitation at the end, that's when you would do that. You know what I mean? Like if nothing else, that's the conversation.
yeah.
And so, man, I think there's a lot to like, but man, when somebody responds in a service, it is the long fruit of somebody that has just been sowing and being faithful to God with their relationship of meeting somebody. And man, it's not like, I mean, I'm sure at South Carolina, we've had more random people show up. But honestly, back to what you're saying, Brian, I feel like the days of people just randomly showing up at events has kind of like deterred a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's just like a lot of people are a lot more event organized, more so than just looking for like spontaneous even. So but we still probably have, I mean, just being in the cultural South, I know we have a lot more people just looking for stuff. But a lot of people who come to our services are invited by friends. That's kind of always been like the big statistic.
I mean, that's the number one go-to is, I mean, they may see your flyer. Well, I put it on my calendar. They may see, we always tell students, if you invite somebody, says, hey, I'm coming back to pick you up at such and such time, and I'm going to walk with you to our building. And so it's so that they have somebody that they're not just coming in by themselves. I mean, we do occasionally have people come in by themselves, but y'all both are right. It's more relational now that it's just like church. If we're inviting people to come to church, it's because somebody invited them to come to church. And they're coming because you invited them. And so it's the relationship aspect. So
That's great. Hey, let me get some notes and then we're going to kind of wrap this up. One of the things I've heard about the large group evangelism strategy, one, give opportunity for sure, right? Make sure your students are clear with what's happening. So often I've been guilty of having large group meetings where I didn't give them an opportunity to respond. Like I would try to give them some action points to move on, but I didn't give them an opportunity to respond to that. So whether it's a card, like kind of Adam was talking, which is a super clear, simple way for students to respond, or something else, giving them an opportunity to respond. But maybe even more than that, and it doesn't matter, I think, if you're in a large context or a smaller context, having some thoughtfulness behind what you do. Everything is intentional, right? So not just the music, not just the teaching, but just the way we train our students to relate with students is intentional. You know, whether it's in the parking lot or helping them walk through our building is great. I would tell students often, when we have a student show up in our building, whether they're invited or not, but they come by themselves, they've done all the work. Like, let's make it easy for them when they're here to feel connected, to feel welcomed, and to have an understanding of what's next. And so being intentional with our students is incredibly important. And I like the phrase you said, see opportunities and seize opportunities. So as long as so always be looking through that and training our student leaders to be a part of that. We're gonna wrap up here in just a second, but one of the things I hope our folks that have kind of stayed with us or watched our videos and different clips have seen is that, you know, we talk all the time, BCMs exist for the purpose of reaching students and purpose of reaching the lost, seeing lost saved. We say in Alabama, seeing lost saved, saved discipled, and discipled sent. That first phrase often is why BCMs exist. And we could just easily say that, but if we don't have thoughtfulness behind what we do, we'll never achieve that. Setting goals, being intentional, being creative in how we do it. I mean, that's we expect all other facets of our life to be thoughtful and planned and strategic. Why not have that about the most important thing that we do, which is evangelism?
Yeah.
And so whether it's understanding your campus, whether it's learning how to connect with students and gathering that information and using that wisely and strategically, whether it's having a personal evangelism strategy with yourself or with our students, setting goals, helping our students walk through that, or to our large group evangelism, we need to be thoughtful and strategic. And the reality is, for all of us, or for students, or for other people who are watching this video, we're going to try things and it's going to completely flop. And it doesn't mean that we give up. It means that we pivot. It means that we try to find different ways to do things. And what works this year may not work well next year. And so hopefully we are ministers who are always growing and moving forward and doing the most important thing on our campus, which is reaching the lost and then discipling them to reach more lost. And so I think that's we have to make sure we're giving that some thoughtfulness. Guys, we're going to pray in just a second, but I want to give our folks who've watched this an opportunity to connect with you. If you said something on the video that they want to follow up and ask you a more specific question, so would you be willing to just give your email address on the video, and maybe we could put it on the notes of this so that they can follow up if they have a specific question that maybe we didn't get to? Would you be willing to share your email real quick?
Yeah, you can contact me at carolinabcm@gmail.com.
Great.
My email address is kwade wade.bcm@gabaptist.org. So
Yeah, and I am BJM63 at Drexel, which is DREXEL.edu.
And we encourage our folks who are watching this, if you want to follow up, these guys are excellent practitioners of reaching students, and they care not only about their campus, but they care nationally about what's happening across our country as we reach students. And so they would love to email you. They didn't really tell me that. I just feel like I know them well enough to assume that. And so, but anyways, So why don't we pray, and then we can kind of wrap this time up together. Anything else before I do that you want to make sure we want to address? So perfect. Let me pray. God, we are grateful that you want people to know you and follow you. I think Adam said, Lord, you've been on our campus long before we were there, and will be there long after we're there. These are your campuses, and these are your students, and you want all students to know and worship and follow you. We think that knowing you is the best way to live. It transforms the way we relate not only to you, but with each other and our world. And we know that you have created BCMs and BSMs and campus outreaches and whatever the language we use around the country. We exist to reach those students who are walking onto our campuses without a relationship with you. And so, Lord, as ministers that have been charged with reaching their campus, Lord, I pray that we think deeply and strategically about how we best position ourselves and equip our leaders to reach the lost on our campus. And we trust, Lord, that you'll take our efforts and take our heart and multiply it in a way that allows us to engage more students so that we can point them to you. It's not about building our programs. It's not about lifting up our own name or just so that we can have more students in our building. It's about ultimately bringing them to you, Jesus, so that they may have a relationship with you and their lives be transformed by the power of the gospel and your salvation. But we're thankful for that. We're thankful that you give us that opportunity to do that, and give us the boldness and courage to be faithful to sharing and leading our students to share. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you for watching.